Well, thank you, Gary. All right. Well, thank you, Gary, for all the behind the scenes work. Really appreciate it. We're at 12:31, so we'll kind of jump right in and into the program today. So welcome. Good afternoon. Happy Monday to all who have joined us today for our Black History Month edition of Inspiring Stories from our members. Just a few housekeeping. If you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll be sure to get to them at the end of the program. Also, feel free, obviously, to write comments and introduce yourselves as well. To start us off here, as Black History Month comes to an end, we at HGAR wanted to highlight a few of our members. And so we have Crystal Hawkins and Dean Bailey with us. And it's really, around sharing the stories of what Black History Month means to them and beyond. We want to acknowledge that, it is more than just a month. I think that's critically important in this conversation. We want to recognize the inspiring legacy of our Black community, not only, here where we live, but also across the United States, and then emphasize that Black History Month is centered around being American. The fabric of this nation is all encompassing of those things, right? And we can't tell the story of this nation without telling the story of Black history. And acknowledging that, I think, is the first step for all of us. So, kind of wanted to put that out there, and as we kind of engage in this conversation, it is intended to be a discussion in the conversation. I've mentioned that to Crystal and Dean. Really don't want it to be question and answer, but a discussion. So again, obviously, Crystal and Dean are very well known, probably more than I am in this space. And so, but for formality reasons, I'll have them introduce themselves, who you are, what you do, where you work, and then how are you involved with HGAR, the different levels that you're engaged. So we'll start off with Crystal, and then Dean, you can jump right in.
Hi, greetings to all. I would think that it would get to the point where I wouldn't have to introduce myself, but here we are. So my name is Crystal Hawkins. I am an associate broker with Keller Williams and Y Realty of the Crystal Clear team. I've been in real estate now about 18 years. It's going on 19, and I actually can't believe it's been that long. My coverage area is definitely, I cover all of Westchester. I go as far south as Washington Heights, but I also go into the Catskill regions because I have a lot of friends from the city. Originally born in the Bronx or raised in the Bronx. So I'm a city girl all the way, still in my heart, and New York strong. With that, I'm the immediate past president for HGAR, and that getting involved with the Hudson Gateway Association of Realtors was definitely something that has changed how I perceive our business, and came as a lot of encouragement from individuals that I have met in the business. I've always given a lot of credit to Gary Leograndi, who is my broker owner, who actually encouraged me to get involved in the board. And interestingly, in the context of our conversation today, he actually encouraged me to get involved to actually represent a diverse perspective and voice. He felt that I had a lot to bring to the table. And at the time, my main concern was like, I just have to make money. Like, I'm trying to run a business. And I still have people who challenge me to say, do you get paid for that? Like, how much money are you making from getting involved with the board? But even so, with that, the benefits I feel are like almost intangible, because I'm influencing a whole industry that I think it needs to be influenced in certain ways that impact those of us as the general populace. So that's all I have to say. Right now.
Thank you, Crystal. Hi, everybody. I'm Dean Bailey. I am broker owner for Dean Bailey Agency in New Rochelle. I've been in real estate for about 21 years. I was broker owner for another agency for about 15 that I branched out on my own last year. And I've done, I don't know how well known I am, like Freddie said, but I've done a lot of networking over the years. I know Richard, Gary, I know, so many people. And I've served 3 terms as the vice chair for Westchester MLS years ago. And I'm currently a member of the HGAR Leadership Accelerator Program and the HGAR Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team. When Freddie asked me to, if I would speak, you don't think about it and say yes. No, you just say yes. I've learned that throughout my careers. Saying no is shooting yourself in the foot to anything. You have to be open. And I'm excited about it. I've been thinking about this like all day, yesterday, and all these different scenarios, and I didn't write down speeches or anything. I just took notes. I'm better off the cuff, and I'm ready to get into it and answer some questions. Have dialogue is what we're supposed to be having.
Right, have dialogue. That's the key there. Thanks, Dean. Appreciate that. And I kind of missed it in the beginning, but for those who don't know me, I serve as Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at HGAR, and I'm happy to be here and lead this conversation. So let's jump right in. I think, Dean, if you can kind of start us off. I think your passion and commitment to this is certainly transparent. So, what does Black History Month mean to you and your family? So, and when you think about that question, what did it look like with you growing up, and what does it look like today? Has it changed? Is it different? So, just kind of walk us through a little bit.
Well, it's it's totally different. It's taken on different flavors over the years, and it's taken on different flavors because it's been more engagement over the years. Because early on in my recovery, early on in my career, I had strong corporate background, and in the corporate background, we didn't have Black History Month, and then you see it popping up, and then and then it seemed like it's the order of the day, so people had to do it. It seemed like, or else you wouldn't. It was almost a business decision. And how I've seen it evolve, and during this month, you see a lot of different. You see artwork, you see songs, you see the theater, and there's just a whole lot of history. Yesterday, it's rare that I get a chance to sit back. And yesterday in the evening, after celebrating my son's birthday, his birthday was yesterday, but I sat back in the evening, if you sit back and look at TV, I saw a lot of Black history stuff. So what I used to see back in the day was, from my parents and everything, was having our accomplishments reinforced. That was the thing. I was younger. We had to have the accomplishments reinforced, and we did this, and we were great and pushing on. And now it's taken on a whole other level with the advent of social media and the internet. I'm not one of the millennials, so when I was in school, we didn't have cell phones and computers and everything. So we had, encyclopedias, what have you. So, one of the things, I had a conversation the other day, is that in the World Book, encyclopedia that we had in the house, green and white, my father, he didn't get rid of them, but he bought us the Black encyclopedia. And inside the Black encyclopedia were all the accomplishments, all the inventors, everything that made me feel good about myself and my brothers, because we saw the accomplishments of things that we weren't hearing in school. So, so it's changed a lot, and that's because technology has been introduced.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, social media kind of has given us a leg up in spreading the word and allowing people to share those experiences as much as possible. Crystal, anything on that?
So for me, like Black History Month, it definitely has been an evolution. It has taken on a different form than when I was a child, versus even what I call a young adult till now. So when I was growing up, I would say that in some ways we made fun. I was a part of a group, made fun of Black History Month. They were like, of course, it's like we have a month for us. And of course, it's the shortest month out of the whole year. They choose that to honor us, right? And when it came to Black history in of itself, it was something that I would say was sort of in my DNA. And, you know, both literally and figuratively, because my parents on both sides highlighted education. So there was a lot of things that was just told as stories, right? Like, and they were facts, but yet you didn't hear them in school, right? So I remember being in middle school and someone making the point, well, Black people really haven't done anything significant. Because if they did, then you would hear about it in school. That was like 11, I'm 11 years old. And I remember going home and telling my parents that, and they were like, well, remember the story we told you about George Washington Carver, or how about Benjamin Banneker? Did they ever teach you about that? And these names started running, and I brought them to school. So as I started to get older, I even had more of appreciation of the stories that my parents would tell me, and even my grandparents. Now, it wasn't as formal as the encyclopedia, but it was still all the same key players. It took another level in high school when we had to dress up, like most high schools have like a theme day. And so I dressed up and I had an afro and a dashiki. It was like we were doing 60s and 70s, right? Was what the theme was. And someone said to me, you look just like Angela Davis. And I said, who's that? I actually didn't know, right? So I went and I told to my parents, and my father was like, what? He was like, didn't I teach you better than that? He was like, oh, how about Asada Shakur? He was like, are they talking about Marcus Garvey? And then he was shocked that at no point in my regular mainstream education in high school were they teaching me this. So then it went into overdrive, right? Then between my family and my parents, it then became, every month, and every month, not just Black History Month, are we going to actually look at the contribution of what Blacks have given to this country? And with that, when I use the word Black, like I feel more comfortable actually being identified and labeled as Black. And that's not the same for all, but that's how I feel. And for me, Black means that I am a descendant of individuals from Africa who were brought here and a descendant of slaves. That's my story. That's a part of my narrative and the DNA and the fabric of who I am and how I came to be. And I think that's a very important story, and it's different from other African American stories because there's more than one. And I think that's important in understanding for Black history, because there's so many things that are common to our existence, that meaning everyday items that we use, that if most Americans understood, it would take away some of this perception that Black Americans as a whole don't work hard, right? Because see, that's a myth. And that myth is fostered by a lack of knowledge. And in order to actually attack any of the issues we have on equality, understanding, on every front, I think it's important to understand the different stories that make up America and the fabric of the mission, the beliefs that we have, and how it falls into the capitalist society. I think all of this is really, really important. Otherwise, we really don't know who we are completely as a nation. So, and thus I've taken on, if anybody sees my Facebook page, I kind of taken on a little bit more. I'm feeling like it's a part of my civil duty to actually contribute to the knowledge of my citizens about, a narrative that I'm a part of.
Well, thank you, Crystal. And certainly, I think, we all have to take some level of responsibility as we grow more knowledgeable, more aware, more attentive to a lot of the things that are happening in our communities. In terms of that same kind of concept and question, do you think there's a generational difference in how we view Black History Month?
Yeah.
Either or.
it's
You want to jump in, Dean? You want to take that
yeah.
one?
I'll jump in for a second. There's definitely a generational difference, and you know what? I have to say that during the COVID epidemic, when it first started, the pandemic, and with George Floyd and everything, I saw the young African Americans step up and protest and fight, just like it was just like the 60s, and they had the same drive and they had the same organizational skills. I mean, they put this together. They were on their phones, and you know, I watched my niece and my nephew, and everybody's like, well, we're going and we're going to put on our mask and we want to march. It had the same tenacity, but of course, because it's now, it's organized differently. So you know, you still get to see it. I have to say this. I received an email this morning from a good friend of mine, and he said, Dean, you have to watch this. And it was a clip from American Idol from last night. And this young man came on there, and he's a songwriter. And the song he wrote about was Amar,
Aubrey.
which is the young man, Marbury, and
Aubrey, yeah.
and the other young lady who got killed. But the song was basically saying that our kids can't grow up. And if you listen to the lyrics to it, you're just touched. And then there were comments on there from Lionel Richie, and Lionel Richie said, everything you said in that song were the same things, same theme from the songs that were being sung in the 60s. So we have these generational gaps, but we're still fighting for the same thing. How many years later? We're still fighting for the same thing. But there is a difference. It changed my spirit this morning, and I'm glad I received it. I pray and meditate every morning, every morning. I'm glad I received it before my prayer and meditation, because it changed me and I needed to pray and meditate after that.
Thank you. Thank you. Crystal, anything you'd like to add?
So yeah, I do see that. For me, I have seen Black History Month and just the approach towards it just really change a lot. And I do see it generationally, not only in terms of the information that's available, right? The spirit behind approaching the information, and the conversations that are happening or not happening. So, you know, I'm definitely a lot older than most people think I am. So I always say I'm a kid of the Pepsi generation. If you remember that, the Coca-Cola Wars and Transformers. So that's what, so I feel like when you look at the energy of like the 80s, let's say specifically about how Black history was treated, I think it was definitely a more of an energy of hope and promise that was going on. You think about who were the top idols. I mean, the biggest pop idol in the universe at that time was Michael Jackson. All right, he was ruling the world, and there was a whole energy that just surrounded that. Jesse Jackson was still in the front line as a leader who had walked with Martin Luther King. One of the most popular TV shows, family TV shows, was a Black family at that time, right? So that was a different energy of the 80s and the 90s. And I think I feel like somehow in the 90s and the 2000s, it took this space that we're sort of past that, right? We've arrived, you know, Oprah's, you know, the queen of the universe, like, you know, we're doing good stuff, you know, we have millionaires. And then I've seen into the 2000s, almost, it was like a malaise almost. I saw the story of Black Americans become so sanitized, where I have stepchildren who are non-Black, and them tell me slaves were underpaid workers. And I'm wondering, how did the story come into a space that is so unreal from the reality. And then the reckoning of America, as many of us are calling it, George Floyd, really cause a resurgence where I see, to Dean's point, a lot of young African Americans or Blacks standing up. But more importantly, I think to this conversation is the non-Blacks who are standing up and saying, well, what is the story? And then feeling that they've been robbed of a reality, because as they start to delve in, they realize how much ignorance they've been living in from generation to generation, or year to year in school, and only now as young adults or now in college are they now discovering that, unfortunately, the story of George Floyd is one of many, and which is causing the outrage of the community. So I see this definitely, this renaissance happening now. And what I like about this one is that it seems to be more collective of diverse groups, and that's what's necessary. It shouldn't just be Black people talking about Black history. It should be all people understanding how Black history falls into the American fabric. And I feel hopeful to see that, and I just hope that it continues. One point I did want to make is, one thing that makes me nervous is I've noticed how Black History Month has become politicized, okay? And it's become labeled as this leftist agenda. Like, this is the language that I hear surrounding it. And when you look at the history, and this is why history is important, that we see that it came from more of a centrist viewpoint, more of a place of equality, more academic, more educational, more based in economics. You know, this is a part, I believe, of the smokescreen that's happening now, that we have to look back at past propaganda to understand that that's a resurgence, so that we can reject it and understand that this is not a partisan issue. Okay, this is a moral issue, it's a social issue, it's a human issue. And that's where it should stay. And once we put this into a Republican or Democratic issue, we've lost the real heart of what this is. And we're getting caught up in, honestly, brainwashing. And I'll be very strong in saying that. So I'm like, don't be brainwashed.
Right,
You know?
right. And no, and I think there's always, I think there's always forces trying to pull us apart. And something that you said, Crystal, that I think it's certainly a value is, the fact that we, all Americans, need to try to understand and bond together to try to understand, acknowledge, but also celebrate Black History Month. So the question, and anyone can jump in. So I don't identify as Black. I'm Latinx community, Hispanic. And so, from my perspective, and I'm sure from some people kind of joining us today, how can we, in a very intentional, productive way, engage in celebrating Black History Month? And I mean that as not as an organization, not as HGAR, but how can Freddie be an accomplice, an ally in this work?
Well, you know what, Freddie, I think that's a very good question. And it touches on what Crystal just said. And when we witnessed all these young kids marching, they were not all Black. So what happens, what we do is, how everybody can become a part of, is that we have to promote the awareness. We have to educate. If we don't do it, who's going to do it? So you can't sit on the sidelines and hope that people are going to participate. And we have to embrace and accept everybody. Everybody has accomplishments. So just because our accomplishments may have been squashed, it doesn't mean that there weren't any other accomplishments. And it doesn't have to be Black History Month. I mean, this can just be any ordinary day. And we need to celebrate everybody, all the accomplishments, everything that we're doing. It boils down to a mindset. It boils down to a mindset. And people have to ask themselves, what is it that I want to do? And that can be for your family, for your community, for the members, HGAR. What am I doing to promote awareness? What am I doing to make it a better space? Like I've seen, like I said, I've been in the business for 20 something years, and I've witnessed things that I shouldn't have witnessed, to be honest. And I don't know how much more it's, things have gotten better in some regards, but if we don't talk about it, people may not know, because people are living, I'm not going to say in their bubble, they are living in their worlds, and and a lot of people are myopic, and they come out, and you don't have to think about other things, and you don't have to worry about other things, and you don't have to really care about other people. So we go out, we have our blinders on, and we go about our days. And if no one is promoting any awareness, if I'm not telling you that there's something that can be an issue for me, you're not going to know. So, it's communication, it's awareness, it's education. Everybody can be inclusive. It's all inclusive. Diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI. That's exactly what it is.
Absolutely. And thanks, Dean. And Crystal, just to kind of harp on that a little bit, what are, if you can think, off the spot, kind of what are ways in which people can engage? So, I can think of a few kind of ways I do on a regular basis, but I want to kind of get some thoughts from you first.
So I can share what's going on in my own personal family, right? So I'm partnered to a person who is from Italian and Scott-Irish background. And one of the things in our relationship that my partner, and I know he's going to end up seeing this video, is that he was able to, or he had come to the conclusion that he's a racist. That's strong, right? He can't, and we're in a relationship, and yet he actually realizes that he's a racist. Now, for some that even hear that word, that's a cringe-worthy word, right? So there could be discomfort right now for me just saying that. And anybody who knows him, they know that he's the most easygoing, kind of approachable person that you'll meet. But when we talk about racism in our family, and is that racism is a spectrum, right? One version of that is extreme supremacy. That's one version. And the complete opposite of that is someone who is anti-racist, who definitely takes on the position, excuse me, to see how racist structures have entered into our everyday lives and being intentional about counteracting that. Well, most of us, myself included, we fall someplace in between, right? We don't hate people that are different from us, right? We don't hate them. We don't think they're horrible, but we've got some preconceived notions that we might think are harmless, that either means that we're superior or inferior based upon our racial group. And where this falls into the context of what we can possibly do, specifically when it comes to Black history, is there is an abundance of documentaries and TV shows that are out there that I don't even think was available when I was younger. And they're literally at the tip of your fingers, because they're streaming, and you literally can log into like just about any app and find some documentary, story, Black driven show that can give a perspective. I myself just watched a movie called Tyrell, and I actually strongly encourage it, because if you want to get into the emotion of what people of other groups might be experiencing, I felt like it was subtle and it was strong. And that was a movie, much less, James Baldwin, I'm Not Your Negro, right? Or even watching the series 7 Seconds. I mean, these are things that are out there that speak to the Black experience, that I think that that's not in their wheelhouse normally, or maybe they have that Black friend. That one Black friend is not going to be the story about Black people. That's their individual story, because remember, the Black experience is a collective of individual experiences, right? So if you have that one Black friend or maybe even a few, it's still going to be germane to what they and their family experience. But to get the bigger catalog of what it might be like, you have to actually step out of that, and you can associate with people through books. There's tons of books, poetry out there, and also being deliberate about actually engaging in festivals and so forth. So it may not be as easy to meet certain people of certain groups. So we kind of have to go out our way to do that. And that's something that in my own personal relationship with Peter, as many of you know, there was so much that our relationship has grown and become richer, even in our conversations, because of so much that he realized, like, wow, I didn't even realize certain things. And I've always associated with people of color. And now I realize so much I just didn't even know, right? That opened up his mind and acceptance on even a lot of preconceived embedded notions that he had, that he didn't even realize they were there until a light got shown on it through knowledge. So this is for part of that. I would say I am encouraging to reject passivity. Don't be passive, be active. And it doesn't mean you have to march or, and hold up signs. It doesn't have to be that intense, but it can be powerful because you can reformulate your own mind and heart.
Right.
So I hope that was helpful and clear.
No, absolutely. I think, to you and Dean, I think, educating yourself, being active, being intentional is important. Some of the other things that I think, we can all do and ponder over is, what kind of businesses are you supporting? Where do you go grab a cup of coffee? You have an event, who you hiring for catering, photography, and this goes to what we do as individuals, but also as organizations. I think there's a lot that we can tackle there, right? Contractors, et cetera. So I think, referrals, we all have as realtors, a vast amount of connections, right? Networking is in the nature of what you do as a profession. And so I think, being aware, being intentional, and being active around those things are critically important as well. To kind of flip a little bit to being a realtor, the real estate space, and I think, Dean kind of talked about it a little bit, what are some of the challenges that you've experienced, that you've seen others experience? And I love to, I'm an optimist, and so we'll talk about the challenges, but I also, how do we turn that, to opportunities? How do we kind of, change the narrative a little bit in our industry to make sure those things don't happen again, or to address and shine a light on those things for better progress?
Well, you know what? I tell you, Freddie, when I first opened up my real estate office 15, 16 years ago over in Fleetwood, there were maybe like 3 other real estate offices, busy street or what have you. And we became known as the Black real estate office. And people were saying that's the Black real estate office. This and that. I was like, I said, okay, is what it is, we're Black. So, but I've had instances where my agents would, go into another office and they were met with resistance for getting keys for houses and everything. So I was like, what is going on? Why would that even take place? So, how we dealt with it was we just went across the street with the agent with us, and we just discussed. We talked. We weren't combative. We didn't say, how could you do this? What could you do? I'm calling MLS and none of that. We just went and talked. So you have to have a narrative, and maybe it turned out these are new agents and they don't know them or whatever. So we can't always put our own biases. And, it's like Crystal said, because we all have our own biases that we come to the table with. We all have them. We can't always assume that that's the case. And even when it is the case, then it's our job to, again, what Chris said, not be passive, because you have to speak up. If you don't speak up, you're going to keep having the same results. So, there are different ways to handle it. And it's not like it's a one-off. It happened more than I can say. And, it's happened to me going to different offices and waiting long to get the key, and somebody's here in the front to get the key. And you have a business card and this, and I say, why are we going through this? It's just, I've had a bunch of instances. The thing is that events like this right here, opening up dialogue, letting other people know, because there are probably people on here never heard that or never thought about it. So they might say, wow, I didn't know that happened. Let me make sure it doesn't happen. So it's education and awareness. That's all it is. It's not being combative. It's not going in there and fighting. It's networking. It's doing this. I've met so many people over the years that if I walk into somebody's office, they're like, oh, what's up, Dean? And I'm not going to be presented with the same sort of resistance that I may have been presented with, in the beginning. So it takes on a whole lot of flavors, a whole lot of instances. There will be instances or what have you, but it's up for all of us as a collective to work on minimizing those instances and putting it in the forefront so people are aware of it and not have it under the carpet, because it's still prevalent.
And thanks, Dean, for sharing that story. What jumps out at me in terms of things we could do to certainly try to rectify those issues is, one, we have to speak up. And let someone know, and part of my position at HGAR is exactly that, right? So if you have no place to go, I'm a great place to start, whether it's through an email, a phone call, or a meeting, a conversation. I think secondly, we also have to educate and allow awareness to take over, but we then got to take that information and put it into practice, right? We can't just continue to retain information and just let it be there. Right, we got to do something about it, and so I appreciate you sharing that with us, because I think it may allow some of us to reflect a little bit about the things we've seen and witnessed, and what we've done with that information. Crystal, anything from your experience or your work in real estate?
Well, I have to say I've had a great experience overall as being a real estate agent. And with that, I think it's also important for me to state that for almost a 4-year period in my industry, I received more direct racism for that period of time than I had ever experienced before in my life. And that's also a part of the story. So that when so much was going on, I had a personal experience that was definitely a departure, that I felt like something was different. Something was different. And there were always the subtleties. Like I myself had situations where, I would go to pick up keys and I was treated different, or I wasn't even seen in the lobby of a fellow agent's office, right? And as I became more visible, then it was like, oh, then I got treated a little differently. And I'm like, I shouldn't get treated differently now because I'm more visible. So let's try to fix that. Also too, there is a different experience for those of us in the industry. Like it's a no-brainer for many in our industry to send out cards, right? Postcards, what you just sold, right? With your picture on it. And I think it's important for everybody who engages in this business to understand that there's a huge population that looks like me, that it becomes a debate about whether they're going to send a just sold card with their picture. So think about that. Something that is so germane to like being a realtor There's a group of us that are scared about whether we would actually harm ourselves in business by doing that. And if that's not your experience, you have to sit with the reality of how powerful that is. Something that depending on what group you're from, you would never think of twice. Whoops. Could be a serious, serious business decision. My partner here is telling me, so sorry, a little here. So, and with that, I think it's also important, specifically in our industry, is to understand how much this industry has harmed a group of people that look like me, and to know your facts and your numbers. Like, to know that in our New York area, whereas we will find nearly 70% of homeowners are white, literally less than 30, like only in the low 30s are African Americans homeowners. So understand from a business standpoint, if I just associate with those of my own, I have a lesser chance of connecting with those who are looking to buy and sell by just staying in my racial community. Think about that. Think about that. That's powerful. And I don't think that people who just look like me need to understand that. We need to understand that as a whole, because otherwise we don't understand the economics of our state. We don't understand the economics of our country and how that impacts people's overall lives, because so much is centered around who you can be by where you grew up and who you know. Okay. So I think that's key, and that some of that makeup was by design. And why? So all of that fits into this Black history conversation.
Absolutely.
And I think that if we're responsible practitioners, it's incumbent upon us to understand that, because we could be doing a disservice to our community by not knowing and not understanding.
Absolutely. Thank you, Crystal. And you know, I sit here, and again, I don't have a real estate background. And so for me, it is pretty fascinating to sit here and hear the experiences that folks are having, and how they, you know, combat that and try to overcome those challenges. One of the things that certainly jumped out at me during my visit to the NAR conference was a focus on safety. And so, as a non-realtor, I said, safety, real estate. What are we thinking about here, right? And so, the two biggest kind of takeaways for me, and we're focused around the DEI conversation, was one on community bias, right? So, going to see a home, someone thinking you're someone you're not, and calling law enforcement, et cetera. So that experience in and of itself kind of jumped out at me. And then also, you know, lockbox placement. When you put a lockbox, you know, next to a building, and you got to go see it after hours, and it's dark outside, someone thinks you're doing something you're not supposed to, again, driven by bias and sometimes racism. And so, you know, other issues that I've heard on a more general, and this is something that crosses, you know, across the country. It's not just here in New York in any way, shape, or form. And so, you know, something to really dive into, and how we respond as realtors, not just Black realtors, right? Because we're not, you know, Black realtors aren't the only ones putting lock boxes at homes, right? We all are. That's the work that we do. And so even for us to think those things through more intentional and with more purpose, I think can make a huge difference to folks. So we're almost at, you know, the last 15 minutes. I want to pose this last question to you both, and then I'll check the questions in the chat. You know, what is one message that you would like to leave our members with this afternoon? Obviously, keeping with the theme, right? Sharing stories, you know, inspiring stories at that. You know, what would you want to leave everyone with this afternoon?
You know what, I think everyone needs to, you know, I don't, it's funny, you know, when I came here today, I said, I know these are inspiring stories, but I like to be genuine and authentic. So inspiring, I don't want it to be entertainment. I want it to be education. So I didn't want to come with the, kumbaya, this and that, but I think that people need to stay abreast of the issues. And I think they need to be presented, and I think they need to be discussed. Something you just said, you're talking about lockbox placement and stuff. I have to tell you, as a Black man, I have to give every showing thought. When I'm getting out of my car, if I have to give it thought. I have to think about it. I have to think about where the lockbox is. I have to think about the neighborhood I'm in. I have to think about the time of day. I have to think about my customers who are with me. I have to think about it all. It's not, I don't just get out my car and say, come on, y'all. It's not that. So I think that we all need to be aware. I think we all need to have more forums like this. I don't think it should be just for Black History Month. And, and I'll be honest with you, we don't want to look at numbers, but for the amount of people that we have within this organization right now, the people who are here are probably not the ones that need to hear it. So we have to think of how we communicate our message to everybody, because I mean, this is an everybody issue and everybody problem. If you're showing up here, you're showing up because you already know and you want to help and you want to do it. How do we get? We need to collectively think. How do we get the other people on the sidelines to participate? That's what our job is. We have a job. That's our job. That's our goal. And everybody's not going to do it. I've been in many organizations. You never get 100%. But if you get enough people where it affects someone and then it affects another and this and that, that's great. People need to hear these stories. And just like I said, and I'll wrap it up because I know it's time. Just like I said, I have to give thought to every showing that I do and my customers. Crystal said about our business cards. I gave that thought when I created. I gave my all my business designs thought, with the pictures and stuff. We have to give thought to our sellers. They ask me, Dean, should I take down my family pictures? Do you know how, that's a hurtful question. That's a real hurtful question that we are faced with, that we have to answer. So I think it's I think it goes back more to engagement. I think it's going to the events like you went to, Freddie, so we can talk about all this stuff, all the things that I talk to my son and my nephews about, and how they're supposed to behave and what they're taught and stuff. All that has to be brought out into the open. It can't be just it can't be squashed. It can't be suppressed. And like I said, we need to try to get participants. And thank you. You're doing a great job. And Crystal, you're the best.
Thanks, Dean. Crystal, last words?
I was thinking about the question when you gave it to us, like what I've been chomping on this, like what are the takeaways? What I'm hoping that our members think of. One, turn curiosity into action. All right. Let's truly be curious. Some suggested projects, and this is something that I do myself. All right. So I'm coming from a place of authenticity right now. So there are a lot of people in our world, especially because of the business that we are in. We meet people all the time. Talk to different people of a certain age group, because we're only going to have them for a limited time. So do we know someone who's in their 80s right now? Right? Talk to them about their experience around key moments in time. I have a client, he is 87 years old. So he was a teenager when Emmett Till died. It's fascinating to hear his story about what it was like to be a teenager. It's the reason he's up north now, because he was down south, right? Talk to individuals, because there's only very few of them left, who either were around at World War II or were kids, or were able to talk to other people who lived during the time of World War II and their experience coming back from the war, and talk to them from different racial groups, and also immigrant groups, because the stories are different. Someone who was an Italian American, someone who's a Black American from the South, someone who's a Black American from the North, those who were from Latin countries, each of them have a very interesting signature around that war. And even more importantly, something more common, more closer to us, those around Vietnam War. Very interesting stories you'll hear, right? Bring these people into your fold, different age groups, different racial backgrounds, to enhance your catalog on the understanding of the world. And I personally do this. Like I say, I collect people. You know, a lot of people have hobbies. I collect people. I like to collect people and stories, because I feel that it enriches my life. So I think that that's really important. And I also would encourage people to take away, specifically under the umbrella of Black history, understand how real estate has impacted Black Americans, right? Understand that. There's a great book, The Color of Law, out there, right? Understand that, because it's going to change your heart, not just your mind. And there could be opinions or thoughts or feelings that you have that, with a little more information, it may change the lens in which you look at the world. So that's what I would hope that anybody who would be a part of this meeting would take that and bring the conversation of any one thing that you learned here back to your families and back to your workplaces. So those are the three things that I would say: turn curiosity into action, understand how Black history and real estate coincide, or the impact, and bring these conversations that you have here back to your family and to your workplace.
Oh, thank you both for the words of wisdom. At this time, I'm gonna kind of look at the comments. I think we have one question as of right now, and it's for you, Crystal. If you can, to explain a little bit more around your partner being racist. How does that work, being that he's dating a Black woman?
Well, that's where I think that we need to open up this whole conversation about what racism is, because it's been thrown out there and people get really defensive and allergic. And that's the word I use. They get really allergic to the word. But the truth is that racism is a spectrum, and this may be a brand new idea. So if we accept this fact that biases exist in all of us, it's a part of the human condition. So, and this is a manifestation of that human condition, all right? There's tribalism, there's in crowd, there's out crowd. And so for my relationship, it's caused growth, because even when you're from the same racial group, there are also inherent biases and challenges in that, okay? And it could even be geographic, like me being someone who is a person of color coming from the North. It's very different from somebody who spent generation after generation coming from the South. We may have a profound cultural difference, and our skin is the same. So I think that racism falls into just a real category of being a human, and every relationship has challenges and things that we have to overcome or embrace in being partnered. And I think that it's created a greater depth in him, but honestly, a greater depth in me, because I have gotten an insight into the view of what I call the majority. That is very unique and profoundly different from my own. And from that, I don't demonize it, which I think is important, because I think that it's helped me personally understand more of the sameness that comes from suffering. And I think it's also embodied me with a gift to be able to articulate that difference at a higher level because I'm in a world where I can understand a little bit more of the perspective of the majority. And so with that, I think it gives me the power to actually enhance and unify maybe more than others. And I think it's, for me and Peter, it's actually enhanced our love for each other even greater, because it's like we're getting more into each other's soul on another profound level. And I feel like he's become, in some ways, my biggest advocate and protector, because he understands me in such a spiritual way from that experience and dealing with the deficiencies of himself on another deeper level. I mean, in fact, and it's taken him to actually change his language in rooms that I'm not going to be in, right? Because he's in those rooms. And so when things are said, he comes with a different power, a different space, by accepting his own challenges and actually finding ways to grow through them. So, so I hope that answers the person's question about how racism has, how that plays into our relationship.
Yeah, thank you for going into depth. So we got about 3 minutes left. I don't see any other questions, so we'll close the session today. Let me first start by thanking Crystal and Dean for sharing such amazing perspective, being vulnerable, sharing stories. I think is exactly what we had planned to deliver. So I really want to thank you both for not only joining me today, but the opportunity to celebrate Black History Month, recognize the history, acknowledge the present, and be hopeful about what's to come in the future. I think together we can accomplish a lot of things. I also want to thank everybody who joined us this afternoon. Kudos on a Monday afternoon. As we know, coming back from the weekend, we all very busy and a little hectic. So again, appreciate everyone taking the time. And for last words, let me make sure to recognize that American history is Black history and vice versa. And we should celebrate Black history forever, right? I saw a commercial recently that said Black history forever. It didn't say month. And so to recognize that this is a lifelong journey for all of us, it should be something we acknowledge and we celebrate all the time. And let's, kind of vow to discover, learn, and act in all that we do. So again, appreciate it. A shameless plug for folks. We do have a diversity, equity, and inclusion summit that we are hosting, HGAR, along with other associations this summer in June. More details to follow, but be on the lookout for that, because we'll be kind of carrying a lot of the discussions we had today. So again, thanks for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you, Freddie. Thank you, Kristen.